Go. All right, so today's Shiur is looking back at Parshas Kedoshim, which we read this past week, which in America is this week, or in Schwartz, I should say, will be this week's Parsha until they catch up to us closer to. Something went wrong here. Hold on. Yeah, they're going to catch up to us on Shavuos. Yes, they'll catch up to us Shavuos. 1 second. Technical challenge here. Okay, now I think we're good. Okay, so this is Parshas Kedoshim. I just want to start by announcing that we are learning Lefua Shalema, Shifra Rivka Bas Sarah Yenta. Shifra Shalema, this is the month of Iyar, which stands for Ani Hashem Rofecha, and you should see Taka Lefua Shalema. I also have some happy news to report that our first grandchild arrived since we met last over Shabbat, and her name will be given in a few hours. We're anxiously awaiting her naming, and Be'ezrat Hashem, we should share many simchas and nachas. Okay. There was a question about, speaking of Ani Hashem Rofecha and Iyar, this past Shabbos there was rain. Substantial amount of rain for these parts. So someone asked the question, is this Gishmei Bracha or Chas v'Shalom the opposite? With the idea being, I just wanted to clarify this point and say that it was absolutely Gishmei Bracha, but I'll have to explain to you what the question was. Number one, the Gemara in Tainis in the first parak is very clear regarding the laws of asking for rain. We start, correct, when do we start? We start at Shmini Atzeret, right, the last, in the Musaf Shmini Atzeret, and when do we terminate requesting rain? On the first day of Pesach, correct? Why don't we continue past Pesach? So the Gemara says that rain that falls in Iyar is not considered a siman bracha, and even the Gemara suggests that as a possibility. The Gemara rejects that possibility and confirms the fact that no, indeed, only rain that falls in the month of Nisan and within what we call the Tkufas Nisan, which is about 30 days after Rosh Chodesh Nisan, bringing us up to Iyar, that's it. So new, it rained in Iyar, so what are you going to say? So to this, there is a Yerushalmi, and the Rambam paskins like the Yerushalmi, and there's also a very beferish Mishnah Berurah, because we know if it doesn't rain, and that's what Maseches Tainis deals with, what does Klal Yisrael do? They have a series of fasts, right, to pray for rain. Here in Israel, although they didn't ask for actual fasting because our generation is not as powerful as the previous generations, they did ask that we insert into the tefillah a special tefillah in every Shmona Esrei that would be like a special Anenu asking for rain. Now, when the rains did start to fall in the months prior to Pesach, there were some rabbis who suggested that's it, so stop, because the rains have arrived and it's enough. Whereas other poskim of note said, no, we're not going to stop until Pesach, because if the Kinneret is not overflowing its banks, there's a reason to fast. Now, however, they didn't continue past past Pesach, so why would it be Gishmei Bracha? So is this in Siman Tov Kuf Ayin Hey in the laws of Tainis? This is a Yerushalmi based on a Rambam. He says, V'kol zeh haseder, all the fasts and all the tefillos that we make, which would normally terminate in, it says Yotza Nisan Shel Tkufa, if Nisan finishes, and the Shemesh gets to Tchilas Mazel Shor, the constellation Taurus, right, which is in the month of Iyar, which represents the month of Iyar, then at that point, that's it. Ein Misanin Od, no more fasting. Why? Because it's not a bracha anymore. But says the Shulchan Aruch, Kol ze aseda kishelo yardu geshamim klal. That's only if the first rain of the entire year does not appear until after Pesach, until after the month of Nisan. But if there's been substantial rain before, but there's just not enough, there's still a drought or shortage of water, then you continue to fast. You can even continue to fast past Sukkot. It says here, can you imagine? You're getting all the way, you go all the way around the year, right?
We say tefillas tov.
Right? Why? Why are we davening for that? Right? Kidei lemalos mehem boros v'sichinim aros. That it should be drinking water for everybody. Right? So therefore, we obviously are looking for Gishmei Bracha. The Gishmei Bracha that we're looking for is only not Gishmei Bracha if there's been no rain whatsoever. Okay? But if the rain has come, but is not enough, then any rain that comes afterwards, which will apply to drinking water and so on and so forth, then that's. Because if Hashem sends the rain, dafka in ER, it's like a statement saying, no, I'm not helping you at all. And if the rain comes, it's coming like as a patch in your punim, a patch in punim, to get your first rain in ER. But if there's been rain all along, the more the better. We don't care if it rains in June. Let it rain in June, July, August. Doesn't matter. As long as it comes, it's a bracha. And as we said, as long as the Kinneret is not overflowing, it's always welcome. So please dispense with any thoughts that it wasn't Gishmei Bracha. Okay, on that note of bracha.
Can I just say?
Yeah, sure.
I heard from someone, it was like drizzling lightly, I think yesterday, and somebody said, in Eeyore, that any rain that you get in your mouth from Eeyore is Ani Hashem Rafecha.
Is a refuah, right?
Is a refuah.
Yeah, why not? Why not? As we're saying, that it's a Gishmei Bracha. Gishmei Bracha. So what's the biggest bracha? When you go for somebody sick, what do? You go to get a bracha. Right? So why not? So let's think about this. By the way, there was an article published of our last week's Shiur, which is online. If you go to fivetownsjewishtimes.com, you will see the written review of last week's Shiur was published on page 62, 63. So it's good that we're 1 week ahead. It gives us a chance to reflect on it and submit it. So it was submitted, but we're now moving on to a different idea. Parshas Kedoshim. I'd like to focus on Parshas Kedoshim. Needs to be understood. And let's start with an important medrash. What does it mean to be a kadosh? What is Hashem asking us to do that He didn't already ask us to do before? We're going to do mitzvos. We're going to learn Torah. What does it mean to be holy? Isn't doing mitzvos holy enough? Right? What greater kedusha could you have to learn Torah, to do mitzvos? What is Hashem asking us to do here in Parshas Kedoshim? So there's a famous Ramban. The Ramban says that what it means is that there's two levels that a Jew operates on. One is called Shuras Hadin, the simple law. I did the halacha. I fulfilled the requirements. And then there is, of course, Lifnim Shuras Hadin. You're going beyond the law, letter of the law to what? The spirit of the law. What we'll call the spirit of the law. That's what we mean by Kedusha. And the classic example that he gives is you shouldn't be a menuvel b'rshus haTorah. What does that mean? You don't be a glutton or a lowlife, right? A boor, and still, technically it was okay, right? In other words, I ate in a very disgusting manner, but everything was glad kosher. I'm not talking about the Pesach programs or the hotels, okay? I'm not discussing that, right? There's a challenge there, keep it simple. The food is coming and waves and waves of food, right? So, says the Ramban, if we withhold from what's mutter, if we just take a step back, and even though these things are permissible to me, I don't overindulge myself, that's what it means, Kedoshim to you. That there's a spirit of holiness, and it's important to note that the word Kedusha is always associated with the concept of what? Havdalah. Right? We know that, for example, in the Shemona Esrei that we say Motzei Shabbos, we put it in the bracha of Chonein Das. We make Havdalah in the Chonein Das. You have to have wisdom. What's the wisdom that you need? What's the intelligence you have? Hamavdil ben Kodesh lechol, ben or lechoshech, ben Yisrael amin, ben Yom HaShvi, l'shesh dimei hamaseh. So what do you see? Havdalah goes with Kedusha. Hamavdil ben Kodesh lechol. Kedusha and Havdalah are synonymous. So what does that mean, Kedusha and Havdalah? So if you go with the Ramban, you'll say it means that you don't want to be a menuvel Rosh Torah. Atam mavdil et atzmecha mim hamutar. I'm myself separating myself off. But let's go a little bit deeper into the word kadosh. So what does kadosh really mean? If kadosh means muvdal, that is separated, right? So but then what do we say in Kedusha? Kadosh, 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 Hashem tzvaos, melo kol haaretz kavodo. 1 second. If he's separated, then how can the world be filled with him? Think about it. Kadosh, kadosh, Hashem is up there in Shemayim, and, he's in his mim'on kodsho, but no, melo kol haaretz kavodo. How is that possible? So, apparently, Havdalah and Kedusha does not mean that the person is not present. Hashem is present and yet Kadosh. And that's the idea of the Jews' Kedusha. We're not withdrawn. We're not sitting in a monastery on the top of Kuala Lumpur, hanging out with the people who took a Tainis Dibur for the rest of their lives and shaved their head bald. And those people are very happy. But they have nothing to do with this world. They're muvdal from this world. Is that the Kedusha that we're talking about? No. We're talking about Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzvakot. Now Tzvakot means the stars that govern the affairs of the world. The Kedusha has to be in the involvement in the affairs of the world. Milo kol haaretz kavodo. We're talking about that by achieving kavod in the world. In other words, what is kavod? What is kavodik? Right? When you say, who is the one who receives kavod in Pirkei Avos? Ezu mechubad ha-mechabed es habrios. In other words, if you're engaged with people, right, and you're giving them kavod and attention and showering them with your love and attention and interest, that actually achieves kavod. And that also achieves kedusha. Because what is your separation? Your separation is, I'm not focusing on overindulging myself in things, right? I'm okay. So let me help you. Let me help you. What is Hashem? Hashem is azanas olam kulo betuvo b'chein v'chesed rachamim. Hashem is not disengaged from the world. Kedusha doesn't mean havdalah, meaning you're absent. It means you're in the world, but you're able to separate inside that world between the things that are tahor and tameh. Get it? You're here, but now you've got decisions to make. This is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm not going to do. So it's a guide for active involvement. This is kosher, this is not kosher. In fact, that's really the very end of the parsha. It says, if you look at Parshas Kedoshim, at the very end, the pasuk says, "V'yisim li Kedoshim, ki kadosh ani va'avdil eschem min ha'amim." See again, Kedusha and Havdalah. I'm taking, it's like Kiddush and Havdalah also, if you think about it. Kiddush is the opposite end of Havdalah. It's really one mitzvah. He says, Min ha'amim lios li, you're mine. And then what do we say? Oh, and before this it says, V'hivdaltem bein behema ha'tahora l'tmeya. You have to figure out which animals are kosher, which animals not. You have to ask a shayla. You have to figure out, is this a proper shechita? Is this proper? What kind of animal is this? Ofa tamei l'tahor. Lo tishaksu es nafsho seichem behema va'of. Don't eat things that are not kosher. Ubechol asher tirmos ha'adama, and eating the creepy things. Asher hivdalti lachem l'tamei. That's what hivdalah means. This is tamei, this is tahor, and I'm going to engage it accordingly. Okay? I did hear a very interesting shiur, once upon a time, an article actually, by Professor Sholem Karmi. He is a scholar from Yeshiva University who wrote about Rav Soloveitchik's Torahs. And he introduced something called the category of the ethical. Let me explain what that means. There's, in the Torah Hashkafa, there are basically three ways to look at the connection between Torah, what we'll call halacha, and ethics. Remember, if we're suggesting that there's something called Kedusha, we could suggest, according to the Ramban, that there's not only halachic behavior, but there's ethical behavior. Do you understand? There's a zayin a mensch. What's the fifth chelik of Shulchan Aruch? Be a mensch. Right? So that's also halacha. It's a basic halacha. In fact, I heard from Yisrael Salanter said, what's that?
Isn't it the sixth one?
The fifth. There are 4 orders of Shulchan Aruch, and I'm not talking about Pirkei Avos. Shulchan Aruch has 4 sections, and the 5th section is the one of common sense, be a mensch. Be a mensch. So, says Yisrael Salanter that mitzvos are like clothing that we wear, But on what did you fashion the clothing? You had to have a dugma, a form, right? On which you sew the dress, on which you make the suit. He says that's the inyan of menschlichkeit and musar and so on and behavior. The Torah assumes that as the basis of everything. First be a mensch, then come and achieve Torah and mitzvos as a precondition, or the other way around. Use Torah and mitzvos to teach yourself how to be a mensch. Either way. But the concept being that this is a basic assumption. So Professor Karmi said that, okay, if you look in Jewish philosophy, there's three ways to approach this. What's more important? Oh, this is such a relevant issue for today, because really, I would say, it's the most painful issue for Jews around the world today, is this point. They want to love Eretz Yisrael, right? But what's the problem? But they feel a sense, an ethical problem with it. What do you mean? What's going to be with the goyim? What's going to be? We can't discriminate against them, right? And there's a clash to such an extent that I think it's become a very, very sore issue on many, many levels. First of all, fundraising from secular Jews is difficult today if you're involving Israel. There's the J Street Knicks creating problems. It happens to be that we're in a very sympathetic government, as generally the government, at least Congress, is towards Israel. But we see that even within the stalwart party political system, that there's people who are questioning, who want, and I don't go into the political part, I can't stand that, but I'm just trying to say that Jews are struggling with this issue. So how do you look at it? So one way to look at it is to say, halacha trumps morals, pardon the word. Trumps morals. Trumps morals. What does that mean? If it's halacha, I could care less about anything else. I don't care. It's not relevant to me. I'm an Oved Hashem. I do the Ratzon Hashem. And that's it. That's all I consider. Right? That's the halacha, that's what you do. You know? It says, kill Amalek. You kill him. You don't leave the sheep like Shaul HaMelech alive, and you don't leave Agav alive. You take him and you slice him in like a salami, like Shmuel Hanavi did, because that's the mitzvah, and there is no other consideration but the mitzvah. That's one very substantial approach. There's another approach which is a little more nuanced, which is that the halacha is the morality. In other words, ethics doesn't really exist outside of the framework of mitzvos. If it's a mitzvah, it's inherently ethical. And it could be that that's something that Parshas Kedoshim is framing for us. When it sets up the various mitzvos and then keeps reiterating, Ani Hashem, or Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Does anybody know how many times those two phrases appear in Parshas Kedoshim? 10 each. How many, and as we'll see in a moment, the Medrash says that coded into Parshas Kedoshim are all Aseres HaDibros. What does that mean? So this second approach would say, listen, of course there's a concept of ethics and morality, but you should know that the halacha is the truly ethical. Not that we don't care about ethics, and that halacha trumps ethics and negates ethics, and ethics are not a cheshbon, lo ba b'cheshbon. Adarabba, the halacha is the moral thing to do. When you slice up agag like a salami, that's the moral thing to do. And interestingly enough, Shmuel HaMelech, when he did that, he didn't just say, I'm killing you because you're Amalek. In fact, my feeling is that at that point, the mitzvah of killing Amalek was no longer relevant because Shaul was fired from his job as king. And when you don't have a king, you don't have a mitzvah of Machias Amalek in the same fashion on a national level. So Shmuel had to justify why at this point he was killing Agag. And he says, the equivalent of this, your sword made many women widows and made many children orphans, and keneged that, your now mother will be a widow, you will be orphan. I mean, your mother will lose you, your parents will lose you, and they won't have you as a child. why does Shmuel have to formulate that? He's like giving him a trial and saying, you're on trial for murder, you murdered many people, you're a terrorist, and you killed lots of people, and you're going to get killed for that. You're getting the death penalty. You don't have to say anything. Just say he's Amalek, kill him. And the answer is that at that point, Mechias Amalek might not have went off the tracks and was no longer going to be relevant until the next Malchut.
What? I'm sorry, but wasn't there a case of, I don't remember who it was, who went out and killed someone who he knew was from Amalek, and he killed him, and he came back, he was so overjoyed that he had done the mitzvah of Mechias Amalek?
It's a longer discussion whether if you could identify a blood, someone who is actually genetically Amalek, call it that way, whether you can just kill him.
But the mitzvah stands by.
Well, yeah, but the mitzvah. Well, let me explain. Yeah, today there's practical considerations. You're going to kill Amalek, you're going to go to jail, and you'll be the rest of your life. Number 2, you could cause pogroms. Number 3, there's 55 considerations that you'd have to ask a shaila for if you're actually going to think about doing that. There's plenty of vigilantes who would like to kill lots of people today, and if they do it, they're going to sit for the rest of their lives in jail or be killed in the process. You don't just jump and do it. But what I'm speaking about is a different concept. It says that Klal Yisrael, as a collective, I'm not talking about an individual Amalek. Okay, that might be the case for an individual Amalek. But collectively, as a nation, we have a responsibility to establish a king and collectively to exterminate the nation Amalek. Not this particular individual, everybody. And then use that as a way to set the groundwork for the building of the Beit HaMikdash. It's a national mitzvah. It's therefore only relevant in a national context. So if you have a melech, then you have a process going. That's why the minute Klal Yisrael got a melech, the task that he was assigned was to go attack Amalek. What do you think, Amalek wasn't around for the previous 400 years? There were plenty of them around, and there were plenty of Shoftim, and Gidon, and Devorah, and Yiftach, and Shmuel and Avi himself. And they didn't go running around to exterminate Amalek. Why? It wasn't in a context. There wasn't an organized malchut. It wasn't the existence of a nation. Right? I'm going to mention also, I think we have to mention the 70th anniversary of the founding of the State of Israel. And many people have different opinions about what the significance of that is. But certainly we can say that it was a point in which, to whatever extent, Shibud Malchus was officially lifted. You know, they announced on the minute that is the British mandate terminated, they said something very interesting. They said with the release of the mandate, the white paper rules are no longer in effect. It was just the cancellation of the white paper that was mentioned. Why? Because the white paper was that we do not want Jews moving to the state of Israel, right? We don't want Jews there. We don't want them to settle there because it's antagonistic to the Arab neighbors. Nothing's changed. But technically, it meant that the Jewish people were free to establish their own land without outside interference. Hence, the negation of Shibud Malchus. And I think that we have to recognize that no matter what the Malchus was and what you feel about that Malchus or what that Malchus did, however horrific or anti-Torah in those first decades of Malchus, or perhaps Adayom, it's still a step in Geula that has to be noted and given the proper, and not to be negated. It's Nishkan Klei Nazach. Even the Satmar Rebbe they asked him about the establishment of Israel. He says, Hashem smiled on the Jewish people. So we have to look at it as a divine favor. Okay, you don't like what they actually did, that's a problem. But the concept of a Malchus Yisroel was reestablished. Okay, now. So let's go. So far we've had two categories regarding the interaction between halacha and ethics. Right? Number one is that halacha demolishes ethics. There is no ethics in the face of halacha. Who cares? Is Amalek, does halacha, you kill him. The second shot is, no. By killing Amalek, we are doing the ethical thing. They are identical. Halacha is, in its essence, moral, which could very well be the main shot in Parshas Kedoshim. we could suggest, which has within it an Aseret Dibros, as we'll see. It has within it different justifications of God's name in Kedusha, which seem to parallel like a new Aseret Dibros, or meaning to say that it also incorporates another layer of Avodas Hashem called the achieving a state of Kedusha, or we'll call it Hashras HaShechina. The Shechina should be Shora. Remember, Klal Yisrael came out of Mitzrayim. They had crossed the Yam Suf. They were all there. Was the Shechina leading their camp? Where was the Shechina? The Shechina was in the cloud that led them out of Mitzrayim, right? So, had those clouds disappeared temporarily when the Jewish people committed the Chet HaEgel, those clouds disappeared. The Shechina withdrew from them, but it didn't mean that they weren't Am Yisrael. Moshe argued, listen, Shechina comes and goes, but if we want the Shechina in our midst at all times, we have to be worthy of that. We have, like the Kotzker said, where is Hashem? So wherever you let him in, And that's what it means, Kadosh, 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 right? Hashem Tzavakos, the God of the mobilization of the world. Malak Kol Aretz Kavodo, he wants to come fill the world, but you have to create a space that's holy enough, that's worthy enough for such a guest. Like you don't invite a very nice guest in, someone's coming to the house, don't let them in. Or let them in through the basement. What's the problem? They shouldn't see the house is not exactly Shabbosdik, right? Things are a little bit in disarray. You don't want a guest then. It's not appropriate to ask for a guest then. It's not appropriate. You can't receive royalty unless you're in an elevated state. You've done your best, you polished your shoes, you spiff yourself up, you created an environment that's ra'ui l'malchus. That's the second shot of Kedoshim to you. Yeah, fine, you're the Jewish people. You may be in a state of who knows what. But let's try to make you a worthy bride. Let's put it that way. You can be engaged, but then the question is, how is the couple behaving? Okay, legally they're engaged. It's a halachic relationship. Fine, it's not going to change. But how's that? And certainly when we go into marriage, which is one of the things I do, that's an advertisement. I do marriage counseling. We're not suggesting to terminate relationships or marriage, but we want to transform them into a place that the Shechina feels comfortable being. And if there's strife, and if there's arguments, and if there's chas v'shalom, things that are done that are unworthy of a Jewish person to do, or a Jewish husband or wife to do, then the Shechina just doesn't have a place. That's all. It hovers above and waits to come in. So that is perhaps level 2. There is a third approach. And this approach was incompatible with the philosophy of Rabbi Dr. Soloveitchik, which was this. The relationship between halacha and ethics is that ethics challenges halacha. It's the concept of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. In other words, let's give you an example. An aguna, a woman who is lost because her husband disappeared, and we don't know whether she can go on and rebuild her life and marry somebody else. So they said Rabbi Elchanan Spector, who was the greatest posek in the 19th century, towards the end of the 19th century, he was the one that advised Rabbi Yaacov Yosef to go and become chief rabbi of New York at the beginning of the 20th century, the very beginning of the 20th century. He was the posek ador. Every major question came to him. He spent an awful lot of time working with agunos, an inordinate amount of time. When they say about the Brisker Rav, when Reb Chaim, his father, was the Rav in Brisk, he spent an inordinate amount of time not sitting and learning. Can you imagine? The most brilliant Talmudic mind in the world put aside. I heard this from Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, the son. He said, when they got to Brisk, and now they were out of the yeshiva and they were as a rabbanus, he said they could barely come together and learn because an almana walked in the door, and a yasam walked in the door, and there was this problem, and pidyon shvuyim, and who knows what. They were beset with dealing with those who were suffering And that is what it means, that the ethics then comes to the halacha and says, help me, address my problem, deal with me. What are we going to do? I make a living selling the kretschmer. You know, the Jews all had the liquor concessions, because they couldn't trust the goyim with the liquor concessions, because there would be no liquor left by the time they came to buy. L'chaim, baruch atah Adonai mechalam shakol nirah. So the Jew who didn't have any taiva to drink the liquor, he was involved with he dispensed the whiskey. No, what happens if every Pesach you have to sell out your entire stock? The goyim know, don't buy anything. In 2 weeks there's going to be a fire sale, and this guy's going to have to unload every bit of whiskey he's got, and we're going to buy for the whole year. Business is over. It's over. What do you do? What's the remedy for such a person? This goes back all the way to the 1600s, when they first devised the concept of mechiras chametz. Not that that's the origin of it. The origins go back to the Mishnah Tosefta. But it wasn't needed. It wasn't brought into the playing field. It existed, of course. It was a halachic remedy that's all the way back. But using the remedy came when a situation appeared that needed to be addressed. And that is what we call the dialectic. It's called the dialectic. In other words, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. There's a dialogue going on back and forth. But in a guna, it's not fair, but the halacha says that you can't marry. But in a guna, it's not fair, but the halacha says you can't marry. Until we come to some sort of resolution. In this case, we can find a heter. In this case, we cannot find a heter. And that's the job of the posek, lahavdil ben kodesh l'chol. When can we find a resolution? And when do we say, sorry, there is no resolution? I think also today in the modern Orthodox community, they have really, really struggled with the role of women. And to a certain extent, there have been different approaches. It's probably one of the most difficult things today. Not in Israel, it's not as much of an issue, or it's barely an issue. But in the modern Orthodox world, in the States, it's a burning issue. And it's the poskim of the door who have to set the parameters and say, what? This yes, this no. This is kosher, this is not kosher. This is tahor, and this is tameh. I'm not blind to the ethical issues here. We're not unsympathetic. But it doesn't mean that halacha can be distorted or broken. It can, if it can accommodate, if it's legitimate, then like I used to say for Rabbi Yosef, koach tehetera adif. We always look to include Jews under the umbrella of halachic observance as best possible, but that has to be with the chachma. So again, those are the three models of the interaction of it's called Kedoshim and the category of the ethical. Okay, I don't know which ones you're sympathetic to, but each one of them have been articulated, and I think you have to find your own, guidance and thought. I'm just curious, who respond? Which one speaks to you? 1, 2, or 3. Number 1, halacha cancels ethics. Number 2, halacha is ethics. It's called the identity theory, that halacha and ethics are identical. And the third thing is that ethics comes to nudge halacha, please help me. It's the dialectic. Second one speaks to you better. I think among the more